So just let the bones rest and let the feet spread. So just bringing the awareness into the soles of the feet, just behind the balls of the feet and in front of the snooker ball heel. And just letting the toes spread and soften. We can let the feet roll onto the outer edges and let the feet roll onto the inner edges. And the knees stay still as much as you can. Just starting to find the big toes and the inside of the heels, and then the long little toe side can get pulled down into the ground. Just starting to create space at the ankle. And we feel that the sacrum can just roll away, the sit bones can just roll away, and there's a relaxation that starts to happen there. The inside of the hips can just start to relax and broaden. Just noticing where we hold around the pelvis, around the tops of the legs, just noticing that kind of grip at the hip that tends to happen there. So can we just let that to just drop away into the ground? The long leg bones can start to look back past the back of the hips into the ground. We've been talking recently about, that pull into the ground that's sort of 3 feet underneath us, 6 feet underneath us, going somewhere towards the centre of the earth. We want to let the bones just rest back into the ground. And then the ribs are given the opportunity to soften back. So if we just take the hands onto the front of the pointy parts of the front of the ribs, just at the base of the front, we can just breathe here broad into the ribs. And just allowing that broadness and that softness to happen. So as we breathe broad into the back of the ribs, the breath out just sinks the front of the ribs towards the spine. And we can let the tummy rest back. And just feel that we can get some space into the solar plexus. And that helps to let the shoulders just connect with the ground. The arms can come back through the sockets into the shoulder blades. And we start to get that broadness in the collarbones and the weight to the back of the head. So just feeling that the neck can start to lengthen and there's a softness in the back of the ribs. So if we just let the behind the balls of the feet pull down into the ground, we start to feel that we get that pull, and then there's a tilt to the pelvis that starts to happen. The tummy starts to drop back and a lengthening starts to happen to the low spine. So just feeling that with that process that we've just been through, that process of reconnecting the parts of us into the ground, we now feel that when we pull the feet down into the ground, it becomes a body-wide event. That broadness in the hips allows the front of the tummy just to sink back. The broadness in the back of the ribs just allows the front of the rib basket to sink back. It allows the vocal cords to sink back and the jaw can sink back. So it just brings that body-wide dynamic to our bridge pose. So as we keep pulling down into the ground, we think about the shins going down 3 feet, 6 feet towards the centre of the earth, down through the centre of the foot. And if we think about the hip bones being pulled back through the hips, so they're going in the opposite direction, there's a spaciousness that opens up at the back of the knee. And it changes the drivers for our bridge pose as we get a nice spaciousness now that starts to open up on the front of the hip. And we feel that a lot of the work for our bridge pose, yes, coming from the inside of the thighs, but also the inside back of the pelvis, the inside of the tummy. And with that base that we've established with shoulder blades and collarbones, can we feel that as we come up through the spine, the softness of the solar plexus by that breath, you know, the expansive breath gives a hollowing out that happens to the underside of the ribs. And the breath out just lets the chest sink back, lets the arms sink back through the sockets more. So if the arms come up over the body, can we feel that the long arm bones are going through the sockets down into the ground, same as the legs? 3 feet, 6 feet underneath us, all the way through. And the more we feel that we've got that pull back through the shoulder blades, that gives more broadness to the collarbones and gives you more softening into the underarm. So the arms might float more freely towards the top of your mat. So it's a process, and as you come back down, can we really let the nose go into the back of the head? If we were thinking about the nose looking into the ground underneath us, that 3 feet, 6 feet underneath us, we're really feeling that we've got these pull of sort of lines of gravity that we can use to pull us down deeply into the ground. And in that pull down is the movement in the opposite direction. And we come up because we get pulled down. It's a little bit like we start to see our long bones as puppet strings. So the more we can pull thighs and arm bones down into the ground, the more we get a pull up in our bridge posture. So it's like we're pulling, the spine becomes the wet rope that is getting pulled out of the water. So the spine is very, very long, very, very spacious. And as we come back down and we feel that the feet get pulled down into the ground, we can drop the vertebrae down into the ground. We feel that the central core muscles get very involved here. Can we feel that the front of the body can almost touch the inside front of the spine? There's a great softening that has to happen in the organs and in the viscera here, and it's great for the abdominal fascia. Sometimes can get a bit stiff and a bit sticky. Organs get stuck to each other, and this is a great process where we can introduce or reintroduce a softness into the belly. So the next time we come down, just letting the back of the pelvis just connect into the ground. We can let the left foot get pulled down into the ground. Let the right thigh bone just really drop back through the socket again into that deep earth. And the knee can come in towards you. And take the foot up towards the sky. And just letting the back of the heel just be drawn up towards the sky. It starts to lengthen out the back of the leg. So we've got a leg that starts to take itself somewhere towards straight, because we've got this long thigh bone that's pulling down into the ground, and because we've got this back of the heel that's pulling up into the sky. Pulls the back of the knee open, but it gives us space into the front of the hip as well. So if it's nice to put a thumb or an index finger into the crease at the front of the hip, we're sending the thigh bone away towards the end of your mat. We're sending the hip back towards the ground. So notice if the sit bones start to tilt in towards you. Can we roll the sit bones away, and you feel the work go back into the tummy? It's an interesting one to play around with, because if you tilt the hips, if you press the foot into the floor and tilt the hips in towards you, you can feel that it becomes a leg-driven movement. But if you let the foot on the floor become a little bit lighter, let that get pulled down into the ground, but it becomes light, just kind of sounds counterintuitive, but we get the sit bones pulling back down into the ground, the sacrum pulling back down into the ground, then that sends us back into the tummy muscles. And you can feel it as a dynamic shift between the two. If you need to change over the leg, or you have already, then do. Just have a play around between those, and there's nothing wrong with either mode. There's just, we tend to use the leg muscles more than the central core muscles. So being able to identify between the two is important, and then we can consciously choose which muscle firing sequence we want. So we start to feel that actually this is hard work for tummies, so it may be that the leg doesn't stay there for too long. Front of the abs might start to burn a little bit. There's nothing wrong with that either, as we just start to identify that. And you might have one side that's more compliant than the other. You might have hip flexors that are hanging on for dear life. So finding that turning point with the knee, which just helps to relax and release at the front of the hip. How are we getting on? So it might be that as we come into the front tummy, it might be a bit of a shock if it's not something that we can hold for a long period of time. This is good. So if you're happy just working on the one side, then you can. If you want to bring both feet in, then also you can. And again, we're just going to let the knees float in towards you, and we're sending the sit bones away. There's a point where, and we can find it slightly more easily when the two legs are in towards you, it's such a little shift. If you roll the back of the pelvis in towards you, you can feel that the central core system switches itself off. And if you feel that the sit bones can get pulled down into the ground and the pelvis rolls away, you can feel that central core system switches itself back on. So we just want the arms up over the body. We want the thumbs in somewhere around the back of the head, base of the skull, because we want the base of the skull just to be lengthening away. And we can feel that on the inside of the rib cage, down the inside of the spine. And again, we start to get that pull in behind the diaphragm, in behind the organs. Can we touch into the spine there? So if we let the head rest into the thumbs, into the palms, keep the elbows into your peripheral vision. So you want them in around your eye line somewhere. You know, the closer you bring them into your face, the easier it is for the arms to connect through the sockets into the side of the ribs, and that's where we want them to be. We want them to be plugged into the solar plexus. So from here, can we feel that a long leg bone can drop back through the socket and a heel can go up towards the sky? So again, we're moving in the two directions with the sit bone dropping away towards the ground, but the back of the heel being lifted, so the leg is being drawn out of the deep waist. And it might be that it's a bit challenging for tummy muscles, so rest when you need to, or just leave one foot on the floor is the easier way forward. And like I say, one side might be slightly easier than the other, but as we work through this, we start to find that the back of the hips start to become really, really light on the ground. This is the beginning part of your shoulder stand, which is probably going to throw some of us off the deep end, but it is the beginning part of your shoulder stand. If we keep feeling that the heels are pulled up towards the ground, eventually the back of the pelvis comes off the ground, the spine peels off the ground, and you end up on your shoulders. But that happens because there's a deep lengthening that happens here. And we leave the sit bones and the front of the hips, the hip flexors, they're all quiet. We keep sending the work back into the deep tummy, back into the deep waist. So don't lose sight of your elbows, leave them in towards the sides of the face. It's a body-wide event. We're always looking for that connection, the connection around the back of the head, which brings the head into this supportive hammock. And then we've got the long arm bones that come in through the sockets into the side of the ribs. And again, that supportive sling of the solar plexus. And it's hard work, so rest when you need to. So we feel like eventually we're going in the two directions at once. When the pelvis is pulling away in one direction and the head is pulling away in the other direction, there is a sinking back that happens into the solar plexus, which sends the spine away into the two directions. So the back of the ribs go into the back of the head and the back of the tummy goes down into the pelvis. Hello, Pam.
Well, I'm just sort of feeling like tingly sensation at the sit bones.
Yeah.
That's all I can focus on at the moment. I'm not feeling doing anything else. I'm just very aware of the
Yeah.
this. Yeah, it's like a tingling, like I don't know what it is, but it's just an observation, really.
Yeah. There's so for us, I don't like the word disconnect, but you get what I mean. It is almost like we have to disconnect the sit bones from the back of the leg, because for most of us it's pulled tight together all the time because the tail is perpetually tucked under. So when we're here and we've got the legs going in one direction, we've got the sit bones going in the other direction, there's quite a lot that has to happen. And here is, a bit up close and personal with ourselves, but it's this, because this is where the hamstrings come in, to the sit bones, there's a lot of very dense, not a lot of muscle here, but there's a lot of dense connective tissue. So for me, sometimes it feels like it's Velcro-y, that kind of, if we were going to pull Velcro apart, that sort of thing. And of course, it's densely innervated because of the area that it's in. So we just keep going gently with that, and we start to create those degrees of separation. So the pelvis can, because for many of us, the pelvis doesn't move independently of the leg. They're stuck together. So this is the process whereby we start to create a space between the pelvis and the leg, a little bit like when we teach the ribs and the pelvis that they can move independently of each other. But initially the waist is a little bit immature and it doesn't know how to process that. And it's the same when we're creating the space between the pelvis and the leg, particularly at this back part where the sit bone comes into the hamstring. Because like I say, hamstrings are big and they work very hard, so there's a lot of dense connections here. So starting to create that. Psoas also blends into here, so those deep internal postural muscles. So for some of us it might be a little bit challenging on the low spine, as QL and those other outer back muscles have to shorten, but psoas on the inside might have to lengthen. So we start to get a bit of jiggery pokery that's happening around the low spine. So for those of us with low spine stuff that we're working with, it's being careful with that and starting as the lumbar curve starts to sort itself out. So that as well as a process. Hello, Margaret.
Hello, yes, that's what I'm experiencing. I'm getting sort of cracking and creaking going on in my lumbar region.
Yes, yes. Does the cracking and the creaking, does it feel like anything? Is it painful?
It's not painful, it's just sort of like, should I be feeling that? Is that okay to feel that?
Yeah, yeah. So the cracking and the creaking is usually just fascia. If it's not, you'll feel it. We don't want sort of hot or sharp pains or, that sort of stuff. But when tissues start to free up, it's a little bit stiff and sticky and gacky sometimes in that, the basket weave that we look at around the spine. Because when we take the sit bones away, we're inviting the sacrum back into the low spine. But when we're laying on our back, the tissues around the spine then have to respond, and then they start to slide and glide over each other. But a little bit like something that we've not moved for a while, it can get a bit noisy in there, a bit cracky and creaky for sure. But just stay in there, and resting a lot. So there's coming in, having a play with it, leave it alone. Coming in, having a play with it, leaving it alone. And listen to your body, because it will tell you, particularly for you where we want to introduce that space, but we want to do it in a very gentle, very intelligent way that your body is happy to do it. But it's good for, those central core, those postural muscles, and the front tummy, that tends to be something that we don't use as much as we need to, or as much as we should. So if we just leave the feet on the ground and come back to the hands which are around the back of the head, Can we feel that the jaw can drop back through? Can we feel that the voice box can drop back through and the heart and the lungs can drop back through? And it's exactly the same as we were doing on the other end of the body, that when we let the long arm bones come back through their sockets, when we let them come back through into the ground and the back of the head lengthens away, and we let the front of the body be invited back into the back body, then the head starts to get drawn out from the solar plexus. And we start to create lots of lovely space into the back of the ribs. Can we make a spaciousness between each individual rib? And the head really can rest back into the hands. And again, it just takes us towards something. We do start to come up off the floor. But that happens because we're being drawn back down through the vertebrae deep into the ground. And it's just a process of really feeling, noticing, where do we need to relax more? Is it on the collarbones? Is it at the heart centre? You know, the further down we go towards the tummy, the harder work it becomes. And just be mindful of that, you know, side of the neck. Muscles getting involved. Notice if the shoulders start to get involved, can we keep sending the work back to the underside of the ribs? Can we keep sending the work back into the inside back of the ribby spine? Can we keep sending the jaw into the back of the head and the tongue rests back? It's good, Lisa. So then just go into the ribs and let the ribs drop back. And the tummy drops back, and then the feet will start to pull down, and you just keep going, and you know, eventually the body curls up towards the knees and we would sit up. Oh, feet on the floor, Sandra. You can have the legs there. It's a little bit harder work though. But it's just keeping with that, the fact that we're going down to come up. You know, as soon as we get this idea that we're lifting anything, it becomes almost impossible to do. It sends it back into the side of the neck and the shoulders, takes us out of the central core system, and then that kind of finishes everything off. So we have to keep dropping back into the support of the hands, into the sling in the back of the ribs, and then keep it's almost looking down kind of a passageway of the inside of the spine. And we just keep looking at that inside of the spine that's been taken up into the sides of the ribby spine, the sides of the neck spine, into the underside of the head. And the same with coming back down, we're just dropping vertebra by vertebra by vertebra back down into the ground. So the next time we're coming back down, just going to bring the knees in, give the knees a nice hug, and have a little rock from side to side. And we're just going to come over onto whichever side is comfortable for you. And we'll come over into our into our square pose. And just starting to feel the front of the feet and the front of the ankles. The front of the shins get pulled down into the ground. So again, we're just feeling that the sit bones can have a bit of space from the top of the leg. So we're just creating this spaciousness between the top of the hamstring and the sit bone there. And just letting the tail lift ever so slightly. And then drawing the front of the tummy in, drawing the front of the ribs in, but without affecting the pelvis. So it's an interesting one, because often when we pull the tummy in, it rounds the back and tucks the tail under, and you can try that out for yourself. But there's another movement available to us where we can smooth the ribs back in to the spine, and it sends the low spine away, draws the tummy back towards the spine, but it doesn't affect the pelvis. So can we just get into there, and we feel the obliques on the side of the waist, and there's a lengthening that starts to happen there. So we start to get a spaciousness between the ribs, which are going forwards towards the hands, and the inside of the waist, which is going downwards into the pelvis. So we're getting pulled in the two directions at the same time. So as the hands get pulled down into the ground, and of course we've got the pointy parts of the elbows looking back towards the thighs, if we pulled the hands down into the ground like we're going to pull the mat towards us, if we keep that pull down into the ground and then back towards us, it takes the ribs and the head forwards. And we've got the shins pulling down into the ground and then smoothing outwards. So it's like we sink the shins and the feet into the sand and then smooth them out towards the edges of your mat. So there's a scoopiness that happens there. We get a broadness that starts to open up in the pelvis. And we start to feel the hip bones at the top of the legs. So from here, it gives us a foundation, it gives us a basis for movement, so we can take the sit bones back and our child pose starts to appear here. We keep space into the front of the hip, but because we've got that pull down and that pull out in the shins, and because we've got that pull down with the hands and we're drawing the hands back towards us, quite a lot going on in here at the same time. But it means that now that the body, the main trunk of the body, can just float back on the runners at the top of the legs and at the top of the arms. And we can go back towards our child pose, but we can also float everything forwards. And again, we keep that pull down through the hands, down through the shins. And that will start to take the front of the hips forwards towards the ground. And something that would look towards an upward dog type thing. But we retain the integrity to the central core system. We retain the integrity to the waist. You should be able to feel the front tummy and the sides of your waist. And that's caused by the shins pulling down into the ground and pulling outwards to the sides. Keeps taking us back into pelvic floor, inside of the hips, inside of the waist. We're keeping the elbows nice and soft, aren't we, Mum? Yes, we are, yes. So the elbow's always looking back towards you, and we've got that micro bend that's happening in there. Looks good. So that pull down with the hands pulls us into the sides of the ribs, but it sends the inside of the ribs forwards and up. It's quite hard work for hands and wrists, so rest when you need to. But we're looking for that broadness. Interestingly, I thought about this, it's Pam's fault, because she mentioned it on Saturday, and then it started me thinking about this ellipse that we've got within the ribby cavity. So your spine is going forwards and up through this oval shape of your ribs, of which the arms are sort of hanging off. But when we pull the arms down into the ground and they wrap around the ribs, a bit like squeezing the tube of toothpaste, it sends the ribby spine up, sends the neck spine up, sends the head up and forwards. So again, we start to find that this is a body-wide event. Looks good, Sandra. Looks good, Lisa. So we start to operate outside of the range of the shoulders from solar plexus. This hard work. So you might find that your child pose turns into a downward dog at this point. If you're coming all the way forwards into your upward dog, the opposing movement to that is going to be your downward dog. So your solar plexus takes you forwards into your movement. Keep your jaw into the back of the head. You don't need to see where you're going. You're being led by your crown. Your eyes are sinking into the back of your head. Nose sink, yes, better. Because as the jaw comes back and in to the back of the head, that lengthens the ribs, but as we go back, it takes us through. So the solar plexus and the sit bones are what draw you back and up into your downward dog posture. It doesn't have much to do with legs and arms. If we think about legs and arms just hanging down into the ground from our downward dog, which may be a little out there for some of us, but the legs and arms hang from the spine down into the ground. And when we do that, it means that it's serratus at the side of your ribs that causes the movement back and up into your downward dog, not pushing through the hands and the wrists. Is this making sense? I see Pam, she's processing. So all the cogs are whirring like mad. It's just reprogramming how we work, because, you know, why wouldn't we use the extremities? They're the first thing that hit the whatever it is we're aiming at first. So it seems natural that we just push through this top line for our downward dog. And there's nothing wrong with that until we end up with, you know, tennis elbows and, you know, dicky shoulders and that. But what's really important is that every time we fire that top line, every time we come into IT band and the outside of the hip, the potential for us is that we're just sogging in the middle, sigging in the middle, so something like that. So we're not looking after the spine. Whereas when we've got this pulling down into the ground and pulling outwards, when we've got this pulling down into the ground and drawing the hands back towards us, it supports the spine. So now it's a spine-driven movement that takes us backwards and forwards, and the hands and the feet become, you know, just facilitators of movement rather than the prime drivers. Lots of people have just sat down to have a little think about that. And that's okay, because it's a reworking of our favourite firing sequences. We want to be using the side of the ribs and the side of the waist. For most of us, we're a little bit weak in the side and the muscles of the side of the ribs, and definitely into the obliques. So we want to keep sending the work back into this space, because it gives us space at the viscera and then allows the viscera, the organs, to work well.
I don't think I've ever been aware of working here before, ever.
Yes. And actually, and that's okay, Pam, because a little bit like your background, which is Pilates, and mine, which is yoga, it's always been this, people are absolutely obsessed. I mean, you're only got to look at the magazine rack in the supermarket and you'll see it. Absolutely obsessed with abs and the front part of the tummy. And then we're all obsessed with having a strong back as well. But we don't really talk about, these interconnected sheeting here. And whilst obliques, we can see them and they are like this lovely crisscross here. There's another one up here, which is your anterior and posterior serratus. So we've got these two kind of, they're kind of bandagey structures, because actually, obliques come down across your tummy to your opposite hip, and the same with serratus. It blends into the fascia, and they come up across the sternal fascia. So when we're in here, we want that to be, they are our stabilising structures. We want them to be strong because they support the spine in our side-to-side movement, but we're very linear in our in the way that we view exercise and movement. So when you think about movement, people instantly start flopping forwards and backwards, because that's what we think about first. But we don't think so much about this, the snaky movement of the spine, and it has that. It has that potential. So how do we stabilise that? And that's in these structures here. So becoming aware of them. The ones around the ribs, they're quite densely innervated, so you do feel them as soon as you get in there. I was doing something with a new video, and we were supposed to hold the weight up above our heads. It was in standing, and we were going down to the side, and then we had to lift the weight with these muscles back up to say, well, I couldn't do it. My brain was like, we have muscles here. Yes, we do. Okay. And it's taken a few sessions just to get them to engage and wake up, because this isn't, this sort of a movement isn't one that we are. And also, if we've had destabilisation in the lumbars particularly, we tend to shy away from these side-to-side movements because it doesn't help the spine to feel stable, so the brain discounts it, and we get this sort of, bracing that's happening. So bringing the arms in and starting to fire these then leads us into a space where we feel safe enough to start introducing these side-to-side movements. Does that make sense? But it's interesting you say that, because what we've really noticed, and I've said this before in the dissection lab, a lot of the time the finger type structures of serratus here, we've got the fascial bags, but the muscles have atrophied and gone completely. But also what they're documenting at the moment is that obliques and transverse abs are becoming less prevalent in the forms that they're working on that are coming through now. So we're now stopping using the cummerbund that we've got available to us on the front, but also these internal and external obliques that we've got around the sides of the waist as well. We just start, and as we use them less, there's less fibres in the packets, if you like. So we've got the packaging, but there's no actual muscle tissue within it, which shows that it's being underused. So, but having said that, we're also finding that hamstrings and quads are getting bigger. So we're seeing an increase in the muscle tissue in the top of the legs. So we're overusing the thighs, and we're underusing the central core system. And that's not good for us in the long term, because we want efficient processes of elimination and detoxification happening within the abdominal cavity all the time. That's useful. Yeah, this is good. So we're going to come up to standing, give our wrists a break. And it's a little bit for the brain to take on. So if you're in your movement and you're taking time out to let the cogs whir, it's good. And then you've got the recording, so you can always come back and play with these again. And we're going to get into this a little bit more. I've been asked a little bit about scoliosis and how do we work with scoliosis. And of course, you know, that is a side-to-side movement that we want to look at. So we want to think about this snaky spine. You know, it's not just for bending forwards to get things and, you know, lifting up. It's very much this, and the side to side, because those diagonal structures help us with our walking movement. We want it to be a sporadic, if I go this way, we want it to be a sporadic movement, not a linear movement. Yeah, we want our walking to be a body-wide event where we've got nice rotation coming through the spine. We're going to get into that. So we're going to take a step forward and just let ourselves come into the feet. As always, no idea what the time is. Okay, that's good. So we're going to take a step forward and leave the back foot on the floor. Not a big step, because we want to be able to feel both feet easily. But as the front of the ankle, centre of the foot gets pulled down into the ground, again, foot gets pulled down into the ground just like we were doing laying on our back, but the long thigh bone is getting drawn back into the centre of the waist. Can we leave the sit bones free? You'll know when you've got it because pelvic floor will suddenly kick and you'll feel the inside of your tummy as well. So we feel that legs get pulled down into the ground. And we feel that inside of the tummy gets pulled up underneath the ribs. The arms come in through the shoulders and can wrap around the ribs. So if we take the back leg arm, reaches forwards, we've got this back heel that reaches down and this front arm that reaches forwards, it starts to pull us apart from the waist. So ribs go forwards, but the sit bone is going back. And we start to feel that we get a lengthening and a rotation that happens here. So for those of us that have had low back issues before, notice where is happy to move, notice where isn't happy to move, and look for your compensatory movement patterns. For those of us that have had back pain and back surgeries and that sort of stuff, the shoulders will get really involved really quickly because this top part of the shoulder is happy to move around while the rest of everything would like to stay still. So we keep dropping back into the foot and give the brain the foot as its foundation, and then it helps it to feel safe. So it's a rotation that we grow from right into the ground. It comes up through the leg. You'll feel the thigh rotate inwards slightly. You'll feel the front of the tummy here and the sit bone going back. And it's just a little bit like our cat pose. Can we just come in at each incremental place and just walk up the body and just check in with each individual bit and see how that goes. It's exploratory movement. Hello, Ronnie.
Sorry, you said at the beginning, can you, I'm not sure what word was you used, but can you kind of release your sit bones so that it's not,
Yeah.
that you're using the pelvic floor instead? How do you do that?
So just feel, this is a great answer, Ronnie. Put your butt in a sling.
Okay.
So when we're here, the tendency is, if I can do it here, when we put one foot in front, we can tense the buttocks and pull them under. Yeah, but we're not going to do that because we're going to drop through this front part of the ankle here. When we drop back into the center of the feet, this nice big place that we're working into the feet. When we pull that down into the ground, you'll feel the kneecaps drop and the back of the knees will open slightly. And then from there, now we're going to put the sit bones just like they're in a sling, and we're just going to lift them ever so slightly. You'll feel the sacrum. If it's nice to get the hands into the back of the pelvis and the sacrum, you can draw the sacrum into the low spine, and you'll feel that this part, it will go round, which of course is counterintuitive to us because we've all been told to pull our tummies in and that gives us strength, and actually it's not true. So the sit bones will lift, the tummy will go round, but you'll feel a nice inward upward lift that will take you all the way up into the other side of the solar plexus. Does that help? Yeah. It's a great question, Ronnie, because what you've seen is your compensatory movement pattern. We all have them in varying different forms. Mine is definitely one. I can clench at the buttocks quite happily. Central core system doesn't have to do anything, and I've got quite strong quads as well. So we can go back to our favourite muscles, and there's nothing wrong with that. But also we can choose another way that's available to us as well. It might feel like you're doing this initially as well because our proprioception's a bit skewed. So it feels like we're poking our bottom out. But actually what we feel is we've got sort of the sit bone lift, which will take us up out of the legs. It allows the legs to hang down into the ground, which is a lovely, lovely thing because then we're not wearing at the hips and we're starting to support the low spine because we've got this nice inward upward lift. And then the arms are there to support you because they plug into the side of the ribs and they lift the ribs off the waist. Yes, exactly like that, Ronnie. It's good. When we're looking at hands, we're very much concentrating on the long little finger side. I was just coming to you, Margaret, actually, because you can do this in sitting if your low spine is giving you grief. So we can, if it's nice, we can just have a sit on the whatever it is that we've got. And it's exactly the same thing. What we want to do is we want to find the lift of the sit bones. We're inviting the sacrum in. And then we've just got a hand that's just going to come forwards. Can we get the arm to lift us out of the side of the ribs? Takes us round. And there's not much that's happening in the low spine. There's a lot that's going on in the ribs here. Rotation of the low spine is only about 4%, and it shouldn't be any more than that. The biggest part of your rotation is going to come through the ribs, and that's probably going to be your most stickiest bit, if we're honest. So have a play with that, and you'll notice that the two sides are different. So change sides if you haven't already. But there's lots of different ways into this. London Yoga Studio have all sat down. I like this. We're going to take the opportunity. It's because you're dog whipped, isn't it? You're all trashed. So it's showing the difference. You can do this in standing with one foot in front of the other. But if it's too heavy on the low spine, so for clients, you guys teach, so for clients that have had low spine surgery, or we know that there's destabilised lumbars, then we get the feet into the floor, nice square pelvis, we leave the low spine alone, and you can just start to work the arm through the ribs from there. And then once you've got that, then we can, put the legs on the bottom and we can pull that down. It's looking better and better, Lisa. And you can feel that from here, at some point, this will turn into your triangle pose. Dare I mention the T word to the yogis among us, because we will start throwing ourselves in the dirt. I do anyway. It's like, oh, triangle, I've done that one before. But this is where, we've planted the arms into the soil pot of the solar plexus. And we've planted the feet into the ground, and we bring them up through the waist, and then exactly that, it turns into that lovely rotation and that lovely extension, but it doesn't load the sacrum, doesn't load the sacroiliac. So this is the roots, if you like, of something that will turn into triangle pose. And like I say, you might have one side that's quite happy, and then you'll have another side that's like, nah, I've got no idea what she's doing and I'm not sure about this stuff. So keep your feet like they're on rails, mum. So your back foot's off on a little... Oh, you're facing me. I'm lining you up with your mat. You're not. You're going in a different direction. Keeping that front knee nice and soft and the inside of that front heel down into the ground. So you fire the inside of the thigh. Yeah, you want that. So we're thinking about central core muscles as the inside of the thighs, the pelvic floor, and then the inside of the spine. If the back hip starts heading towards the wall behind you, just catch a hand around it and put the work back into the central part of the body. Does that feel better, Margaret? Is that more supported? Good stuff. Good stuff. So like somebody's got hold of your little finger knuckle, Pam, and is taking it up to the top of the wall in front of you. Yeah, it's better. Let the back of the arm connect into the side of the ribs and round the ribs will go. Drop the shoulder blade away from the ear. Let the jaw come into the back of the... Yeah, it's better. And you see that it starts to then go, oh, the other muscle, the other one. Yes, it's better. It's better. This is such a fast connection to the brain. Whoop, whoop, whoop. It's right there. As soon as the arm comes up, past the shoulder line, it takes us back into trapezius. And it's a concerted effort to rewire down through this part rather than this one.
I was going to ask, are the feet tracking? So you literally like in walking mode? Yeah. Stood still and then just gone. Okay.
Yeah.
So then you're a little bit equal amounts of weight going down to the inside and the outside of that back heel.
Yeah, because you're spiraling the legs back through the hips into the underside of the waist. So you feel that the legs pull the waist open because if the pelvis goes down and the ribs go up, we get this going in the two directions in the tummy. It's great. We're all going to have washboard abs for Christmas. It'll be amazing. Sarah Jane's like, yeah, I'm signing up for that. But we want an awareness of obliques and, the whole corset of the waist. And like I say, we can get very focused in our exercise. I do go to generic exercise classes and it's all about the abs, and particularly with Pilates, it's all about the zipping up. But if we go back to Joseph Pilates' initial teachings on what that meant, it was actually from the inside of the knees all of the way up through. It wasn't just the zipping up on the front tummy. There's a lot more depth to that statement than is now bandied about in your standard classes. So, and it's being intelligent about that. Yeah, can we get on the inside of the hips? Can we get on the inside of the waist? This is good. So we're going to come back to centre. And we're just going to take if it feels nice, just taking the hands together, back of the hand into the palm. And just that nice, give the shoulders a break. And just let them drop back into the centre. And then we can give the legs a nice shake as well. Just feeling that the pelvis can just hang from the underside of the ribs. Feeling that the front of the hips, as the back of the pelvis comes forwards, we just feel that the front of the hips are soft. And we can let the legs be a little bit free. And then we're going to come down to sitting in our own time. So if you're on your chair or you're on your sofa and you want to stay there, you can stay there. If you want to have the sofa at your back, if you want a cushion underneath you, all of that stuff. So making sure that you've got support. Always looking for support. You can have legs out in front or legs in towards you, whichever feels nice. And we're just taking the thumbs into the underside of the skull. And just letting the jaw come back and up and in. And the nose can come back and in. And we're just letting everything come back into the ribby spine, nice and long, and then just leaving that there. Let the hands rest somewhere around the knees. And just noticing your breath for a moment. So just notice how your body feels from when you started. And just giving the fingers and toes a wiggle. This is good. We'll just take the arms up over the head and the legs long for a nice stretch through your body. And bring the knees up to the chest, give the knees a nice hug. You've worked hard today. It's been a pleasure as always. Thank you so much for joining.